Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 19th episode of The Inbox, and this is the series where I go through and answer the questions that you guys ask of me. So for today's first question, we've got John Gallagher asking, where do I see the Xi'an Scout being used most effectively in the PU? And is it expected to be a secondary racer? The Scout is absolutely going to be able to be used as a racer. It's fast, it's very nimble, it's very responsive. I think it's got all the attributes that you would want in a racer, outside of the fact that it's got a very large forward-facing cross-section, which means that you're a little bit more likely to clip other obstacles that are around you. I think where it's most likely going to excel is going to be in that Scout role, like as far as combat goes. It's fast. It should be able to get out in front of combat very quickly. It should be able to see what's going on. It's got decent weaponry on it, but I think what's going to happen is if you get in there and you see a threat, you can call in your friends and use that agility and speed to kind of be a pest ship to kind of keep that target occupied until your crew gets there. Or if you're in an overwhelming force or just a situation that you want to avoid, you've got the speed and ability to get out of that situation. So I think it really is going to be truly excelling in that scout type of role. It could also probably do fairly well as an explorer. We see a little bit of commentary about that, but until we get more information about range of ships and what the sensors and scanners are, it's hard to really say that for sure. Unable Pone says, thoughts on the Kr'Thal and how that might play out in the game. For those of you that don't know who the Kr'Thal are, they're another race that's been mentioned. I think the last time it was mentioned by Chris was back in 2013. But they've been at war with the Xi'an for a few hundred years. And where they are is, if humans are at point A and the Xi'an are at point B, the Kr'Thal live on point C, on the other side of the Xi'an. So we're not really in direct contact with them, and we haven't had any contact with them. And it's something that we don't want to do, because making friends with your ally's enemy is a bad idea. So I don't think we're going to see them in Squadron 42, but I think we're going to get some grand entrance one day in the persistent universe. Potentially a situation where either the Xi'an are calling for help, and it's a good way to mobilize your military fleet to go give our allies help. Or potentially, maybe the Kr'Thal end up finding a jump point or some path that leads them around Xi'an space and into our territory. And I think it's just going to be a big, exciting day that happens in the persistent universe. So that's kind of my guess on it. But again, they don't talk about it very often, so it's hard to really answer that question confidently. James Matthews, what are the chances that a reworked 315p cabin, or gets a cabin similar to the Mustang Beta when it gets reworked? I think the chances are relatively high. But some of that's going to be based on the space that's allocated and what they can actually use it for. It's definitely on the block to get a revamp, and it desperately needs one because, like I mentioned in a previous video about ships I don't like, the 300 series right now is in a terrible place. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be as inclusive as the beta is, but I think it needs to get its own flair. I think it needs to have most of the same amenities, but at a higher luxury level. Remember, the 300 series is sold as a luxury ship. It should look really nice, but inside it doesn't feel luxury at all. So what they probably need to do is completely remove one of the doors, maybe even consider finding a way to get rid of some of the mechanics that allow you to get a little extra room on one side, and then you can kind of have a little bit more functional space based on that. You don't need two doors. I don't know why the ship has two doors. It's symmetrical and it's a nice looking design, but you don't need the second door. So it's going to get better, but how they make it better, we're not sure. Chance says, two-part question. I have the Starfarer Gemini and an Orion mining platform. My intentions are to have an armored transport for deep space mining operations while also cutting fuel costs. Will these two ships complement each other well? Yeah. For that purpose, they could do really well. Not only could the Gemini help to keep your Orion going on those deep space missions, but additionally, it also has some nice cargo space, so potentially you could offload some cargo from the Orion into the Gemini to also help you continue to move forward. And question 2, in which of the first few systems do you think available would be the best mining with nearby spaceborne hydrogen fuel source? I'll answer that in a sec. I actually want to go back to the first question because I had another thought. I think the two are going to do well together, but I think what your question is really getting at is, can you just run the two of them together? Is a Gemini going to be enough to protect the Orion? And it depends on the fleet that attacks you. The Gemini has some really big weapons on it. It's got enough turrets to give decent coverage, but it is going to be slow. It's not going to be maneuverable. So if you're being attacked by a large force or just a good number of fighters, it's going to be hard to be able to keep your Starfarer safe and the Orion safe. So in most situations, yes, I think they'll complement each other well, but there are situations where just the two of them together aren't in a really good spot. But getting back to the second question, I think what we're going to see is Stanton has been designed to be the test bed. That's where we're playing now in the Persistent Universe. And within Stanton, we've got an asteroid field that hasn't been released yet. We also have asteroids around things like Yella. And we also have Crusader, which is a gas giant. So you could potentially just do everything there within Stanton. And I think that was done on purpose because CIG knows they want to be able to test everything in the starting area. Outside of that, Pyro is one jump away, and there is an asteroid cluster that's known to have some rare elements there, so you could potentially make some money. There is a gas giant in Pyro, but it's got poor hydrogen, so I don't think it sounds like you're going to be able to do great refueling there, though you could probably do some. AGNSS says, do we just put questions here? Yes. That's all you need to do, so put a question in the comments and I'll get to it. Kyle Kester says, hey Youngblood, been following you for a little while now, and a thought occurred to me. In almost all games that are in any way comparable in terms of in-game player-driven economy, like EVE Online, real-world cash always trumps in-game currency in terms of real value. So with this thought, what's stopping somebody from, and I'm going to summarize this, what's stopping somebody from guesstimating what the cost of like a Javelin's going to be, buying all the credits or with real money, so then you can earn a Javelin on day one? There's some limits that are in place. Like you can only buy, I think it's like 15,000 credits a day. And additionally, you can only, and maybe it's 25,000 credits a day. But there's a max of 150,000 credits per account. So there may be ways for people to game it. Like you might be able to have multiple accounts and then you can transfer funds later in the game or something like that. But there's a limit to it, and they probably have a pretty good idea of what that limit equates to in-game, and they've set it at that level for a certain reason. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, but we'll just have to kind of see. James Good says, on the Starfarer, will you be able to use any gas giant to scoop fuel, or if we only be able to use certain ones? I think I answered this in the previous video, but since I couldn't remember, I wanted to go ahead and just speak to it again. What you're looking for when you're scooping fuel is hydrogen. So if the gas giant you're trying to scoop has hydrogen, you can scoop at it. There's going to be some that are like pure and you need very little refining. There's going to be some that are very mixed and you're going to have to do a lot of refining. But if it's a gas giant, and again, I don't scientifically and astronomically, I don't know if there's gas giants that don't have hydrogen, but if that ends up being a situation, you wouldn't be able to do refueling there. Drew Cypher gives me a long question here, so I'm going to try and work my way through it. So what in your mind would make the Retaliator a fun ship? He's been running through the forums, talked about Ben talking about modules, similar to those on the Vanguard, which could change the turret setup. So my question would be, if a module exists to, say, swap out one or even both of the torpedo bays in favor of fixed or possibly gimbaled heavy armament analogs to the B-25 gunship, or potentially a setup with the long-range anti-missile, anti-starfighter platform, etc., etc. I think, in my mind, that's a great idea, and it's something that I haven't really considered. But when you go back to what the real purpose of the Retaliator bomber is anti-capital ship or anti-large ship. It is the big-scale bomber that we have in-game. Now, if you can exchange certain bombing aspects of it, but still keep it in that purpose, like you're still targeting cap ships, then having a massive railgun mounted to the bottom, then maybe it becomes something like a pseudo-small Idris or something like that. I think that would be fun. I don't know if they're going to go that way. I think the pieces are in place. You've already got the ability to kind of extend weaponry out the bottom of the ship, so I think it's possible. I just don't know what their long-term plans are for it. I think in theory, though, you're absolutely right. That could be really cool and really fun to see. You also go on to talk about, and this is one that I really like, potentially being able to swap out 3 turrets and maybe use them for like scanning and turning it into a long-range exploration type of ship. I think that is something we will almost definitely see in game, especially when we look at other ships like the Constellation, which we know the Aquila, which swaps out one of the turrets for the sensor arrays. So I think we're already seeing some of those aspects in the game, and I think it's something that's going to be continued to be developed. The Vanguard Sentinel, for example, is another good example that kind of swapped out the turret for yeah, like the communication radar, EWAR type abilities. So I think that's something that we will see, and I think it's something that would absolutely make the Retaliator fun. But yeah. If there's more that you wanted me to answer in that, let me know. I'll make sure to wrap back around on it. But it was kind of a long question for this. And then Philippe KK says, what is your HOTAS setup? Any recommendations? My HOTAS setup is a X52 Pro. I love it. I recommend it to anybody. I think it gives you a really nice balance of button placement and button total. There's been mixed reviews on the quality of the product and how long it lasts. Mine, I had one that broke, but I sent it back to SciTech and they sent me a brand new one. So, I mean, it's been good for me, but there's a lot out there. It's a hard question to answer. A lot of people like the X55. If you want to get to higher level stuff, some of the Warthog stuff is really impressive. And there's just a whole bunch, and even some of the cheaper stuff like the, the 3D Extreme Pro, the Microsoft one for like $25-30, does a good job as well. T1600 is a good one. Basically, if you just Google Star Citizen, joysticks or Star Citizen HOTAS, there is a ton of recommendations out there. Not to mention whatever SciTech's coming up with for the Star Citizen specific one. So that's going to be it for this one. I'll be having another one coming out soon, so get your questions in. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.